晚上好. Good evening. China, China, China. China is the country of the future. Those were the words of Sir Abbas Effendi, a Persian philosopher and a philanthropist of the early 20th century. And these were the words, these were the light that brought me to China. One day in 1986, I decided that I wanted to go to China. I asked my girlfriend if she will follow me to China. Without any hesitation, she said yes. I'm not sure whether she loved me more or whether she loved China more. But we got married at a fairly young age, packed our bags, and left for Macau. During those days, Malaysians were not allowed to go to mainland China. So the closest I got to was Macau. I could actually see mainland China from my little apartment in Macau. In Macau, I became a teaching assistant to a sinologist and economics professor, Professor Rolf Kramer. I started my study of China under his supervision. At that time, he made several visits to mainland China. He did this annually. And it was later that I realized that he was going to the China-Europe Management Institute, CEMI, which is the predecessor of CEIBS. I followed this mentor of mine to New Zealand in the mid-1990s, and then in 2005, he urged me to join CEIBS, where he was dean. CEIBS celebrates its 30th anniversary this year, 2024, and I'm glad to be part of this journey for about 2/3 of its life. In 1994, when the China-EU cooperation was discussed, this issue of Europeans helping to enhance China's talent resulted in a joint venture between the EU and the Chinese governments that gave birth to this entity that we call China-Europe International Business School. It makes a lot of sense in that most FDI that came into China in the early years of 改革开放 used joint ventures as a vehicle to enter China. At that time, Chinese managers were not very familiar with many Western concepts and practices like profits, strategy, marketing. Chinese managers were more familiar with concepts like quotas, targets, output. So to teach Chinese managers, professors from the European Union and North America were flown in on a monthly basis. And so CEIBS became a knowledge dissemination center. I suppose one could say this was the westernization of China. Now let's have a quick look at China 30 years ago. 30 years may seem a short time, but when one puts it in the perspective of modern China, it's a long part of China's history. It's about 2/5 of the People's Republic and 3/4 of an open China. In 1994, China's GDP was about 560 billion US dollars. Now, how big was that? Well, that's about similar to the size of Canada, similar to the size of Mexico or Brazil, maybe a little bit larger than South Korea. China's economy was about 2% of the global economy. Compare that with the mighty United States. The US economy was about 26% of the global economy at that time. This was about the same as the size of the EU. Germany was 4 times larger than China. What was China producing at that time? China's exports may give us an idea of China's competitive advantage. In 1995, half of China's total exports were textiles, apparels, clothing, footwear, toys. Half. China exported about $150 billion worth of merchandise goods. Today, these same items make up less than 17% of China's total exports. But of course, China exports more than 3.6 trillion US dollars worth of goods today. Today, nearly half of China's exports comprise of technology-related products. So in the mid-1990s, it was quite understandable that China accepted the EU's offer for these Western concepts and practices to be taught to Chinese managers so that the Chinese talent can be enhanced, or perhaps a more politically correct way of saying it, to bridge the managerial competence gap in China. A significant event in this 30-year journey was the Asian financial crisis of 1997-1998. Many may have forgotten that it was China that played an important role in bringing the currency crisis to an end in 1998 by warning currency traders not to speculate on the Hong Kong dollar. Interestingly, it was during this period, 1997 to 1999, that this campus in Pudong was planned and built. A crisis for Asia, but certainly a victory for CEIBS. Another major watershed event in China's modern economic history is the admission of China into the WTO, the World Trade Organization, in 2001. This was after some very difficult negotiations that finally the US, the EU, Japan finally agreed to accept China into the WTO. China was given a developing country status, but also a non-market economy status. The assumption at that time was that China would follow a common path taken by many other developing economies, especially the economies in East Asia. A path where there would be a transformation into a market economy. But one wonders what exactly is meant by a market economy. An economy with minimal state intervention? Then why is it that every time an economy goes into some kind of trouble, everyone looks to the state to bring the economy out of recession? But the membership into the WTO did change China. For the next few years, after the admission into the WTO, China's exports grew at an average of 30% annually. International trade, foreign direct investment did truly become an engine of the economy. As China entered the WTO, CEIBS also made its own accomplishment at the global stage. For the first time, all three programs of the school, the MBA, the Executive MBA, and the Executive Education, were all ranked among the world's top program by Financial Times. As the world was reeling out of the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009, China played an important role in generating the much-needed global growth. It was about this time that China gets noticed by the world, not just as a factory for the world, producing t-shirts, toys, shoes, but also as an economic power that needs to be reckoned with. As the years went by, both China and CEIBS wanted to be recognized as an important player within their respective spaces. CEIBS did not want to be a school that merely disseminates knowledge. So did China. For years, China was known as an imitator, and it became quite good at it. But today, China wants to be known as an innovator. As a speaker in another TED episode said, yes, China may not be great in going from 0 to 1, but China is very good at going from 1 to N. China can use ideas and transform it in ways that you can only imagine. The West had Tesla, but China can make an EV at a fraction of the price with or without government subsidy. The West had Facebook, Instagram, Apple Pay, WhatsApp. China needed only one super app. It's called WeChat. At about the same time, there was an ongoing debate within CEIBS as to the future direction of the school. Should it be a Chinese business school, or should it be a global business school? Why not both? A school that has deep roots in China, but yet with a global mindset. China depth, global breadth. Today at CEIBS, we produce more than 100 China-related cases every year. Cases that tell the China story. Stories of not only of Chinese companies like BYD, Tencent, Huawei, Alibaba, CATL, but also the successes and challenges of multinationals in China. So we cannot boast that we have a Nobel laureate in our economics department. But our professors continue to create knowledge quietly and challenge the conventional wisdom by providing a China perspective to the body of knowledge that exists. Perhaps there are some theories that need to be revisited because it may fail to adequately explain the China story. Perhaps there are some concepts that need to be redefined, like a market economy. Perhaps a free market economy is good, but perhaps it can serve society better if it considers local characteristics. A market economy with Chinese characteristics. As China launched the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013 to share with the developing world the secrets of its economic success, CEIBS also expanded its campuses internationally and set up teaching facilities in Accra, in Ghana, and in Zurich in 2016. Training business managers from multinationals in China was important, but not sufficient. CEIBS needed to also cater for Chinese companies that were blooming, including many that ventured abroad. With the COVID pandemic, the manufacturing-driven economy was greatly affected. It has to be one of the greatest tests to the China story. To protect the health system and human lives, lockdowns and border controls were strictly implemented. The extent to which the economic and social environment of a country can withstand such an impact has to be a good measure of the maturity of an economy. COVID could not defeat China. This was the case for CEIBS too. The person-to-person interaction is an important aspect of business education. Within the limits that was allowed, CEIBS continued its mission, urging students never to pause in their learning journey. COVID disappeared as fast as it came, and life in campus returned to normality. To have several hundred people in one room as what we have here today was unimaginable just a year ago. The journey of CEIBS and China has been so synonymous. It has been a transformational journey, not just a growth journey. What started as a flame has now become a well-contained fire. China has transformed itself from an insignificant economy to be the second largest economy, not just in terms of size, but also in terms of talent, innovation. It has become a leader of the global south. In the same way, CEIBS also has transformed itself from a knowledge dissemination center to a knowledge creation center. We can proudly claim today that we have among the best MBA and executive MBA program in the world. While in the past, China and CEIBS looked to the West as a model, today, China has to write its own future. There is no country in the world like China, with its large population, its unique political and economic systems, nor in terms of culture. So it needs to find its own model of growth. When I see and interact with the talents that come through my classroom year after year at CEIBS, when I meet young teenagers in the countryside, when I go with my volunteers to conduct some leadership camps, indeed, listening to the 8 speakers before me, I have no doubt that China, its people, its companies, its government will find that new model. A model that will address the aging population, a model that will be more equitable, a model that will inspire young generations, a model that will inspire young generation to enjoy and appreciate lucid waters and lush mountains. For the last 30 years, China has become a little bit more global. Perhaps now it is time for the world to become a little more Chinese. After all, isn't that what we mean by diversity? A world that is diverse in terms of its economic systems, its political systems, in addition to a diverse cultural systems. If we can have diversity in companies, in countries, why can't we have diversity in the world? Shouldn't we regard the earth as but one country, and we, mankind, its citizens? As Sir Abbas Effendi stated more than 100 years ago, China is the country of the future. Don't you think that future is now? Dear students, I love you all. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.